like to introduce our three wonderful neurosurgeons who are with us. Dr. Crystal Calderon is a citizen of St. Lucia and a final year neurosurgery resident at the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine, Trinidad and Tobago. She was the inaugural winner of the Congress of Neurological Surgeons, Harvard and Massachusetts General Hospital International Observership Program in 2022. Her current career interests focus on pediatric neurosurgery and neuro-oncology. Dr. Maria Punchak is a current fifth-year neurosurgical resident at the University of Pennsylvania. She obtained her bachelor's degree at Georgetown, followed by a master's of science at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and an MD from the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. She's originally an immigrant from Siberia, and she's always had an interest in working with individuals of different cultures. It was the exposure to the field of global health in London prior to medical school that informed her ultimate career path into global surgery. Her career goal is to increase access to quality neurosurgical care in low and middle income countries in a sustainable way. She's previously worked in Bolivia, Uganda, Liberia, South Africa, and Mozambique. Her ultimate goal is to become a pediatric neurosurgeon in the US and internationally. And rounding out our panel, we have Dr. Eliane dos Santos Rubio, who's a Dutch Angolan neurosurgeon who trained at Erasmus Medical Center in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Dr. Rubio completed a fellowship with Professor Evandro de Oliveira and Professor Ferreira Chidad in 2015 to 2016 in microneurosurgery. She's been working in Curacao since 2017 as a consultant. She's devoted her time to capacity building in her region. She co-founded an NGO. She runs a solo practice. She's also finished an on-location spine fellowship under the supervision of Professor Wilco Paul. Because of the vast amount of complex degenerative spine disease seen on the island. She's recently expanded her scope to global neurosurgery, has published many, many papers, has engaged in many different collaborations. She's also a member of several neurosurgical societies. So basically we have three sort of eminent neurosurgeons at different stages of their careers with us today. And I think, why don't we just dive in? So with that, panelists, why don't you tell us a little bit more about, where you grew up, how that's informed your journey so far, what your backgrounds are like. Why don't we start maybe with Maria, Dr. Punchak.
Perfect. So I'm Dr. Punchak. You heard a little bit about my background. I was born in Russia, in a city called Omsk, and then moved to Philadelphia when I was around 10. Spent like the rest of my schooling until end of high school in Philadelphia. And then basically since then, I've been all over the place, although I've come back to Philadelphia for residency. So I did my undergraduate at Georgetown. After Georgetown, I actually was not sold on doing medicine in general. I kind of wanted to travel and explore other options. I had an interest in epidemiology and public health. And I developed that really towards the end of my time of my undergraduate studies. So I decided to pursue it and not commit to medicine just yet. So I did that master's in London in public health. And then I worked in Liberia for almost a year with a community health worker program. In Liberia, actually, I was doing a lot of database management, database creation, and outcomes tracking for our cohort of patients, community health workers. And then I worked with very inspiring physicians, and I realized that I wanted to be a lot more hands-on and not have data be some of my career, but not all of it. I didn't feel as passionate about it. So that's when I pursued medical school in Los Angeles. And then again, in medical school, started loving surgery and neurosurgery in particular. And then luckily was able to find opportunities and start to carve out a little area for myself within global neurosurgery. So I worked with in Uganda with some collaborators from Duke. I was able to get in touch with Dr. Q at Mission Brain and spend time in Mexico and just keep on growing, expanding my network, clearly meeting a lot of you guys here also from all over the world. So it's very inspiring. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And what about Dr. Calderon? Can you tell us a little bit about your background and the reasons why you decided to go into neurosurgery as well?
Hi, everyone. Dr. Crystal Calderon. So you guys heard, I was born in St. Lucia in the Caribbean. And I then went into medical school in Trinidad and Tobago, the University of the West Indies. After medical school, I always knew I wanted to do surgery. The question was, what type of surgery? So actually, when I started my postgraduate program, I started off in general surgery. And then I actually switched over to neurosurgery about midway through. And hence, that's how I'm here now in neurosurgery. Interesting enough, neurosurgery just makes sense to me in terms of the management, the pathology, and as much as there's a lot of morbidity and mortality involved in the neurosurgery discipline, you do change lives, you do make a difference, especially when you look at pediatric neurosurgery and neuro-oncology, you do make such a big difference. So that's how I ended up falling in love with neurosurgery. So currently I am in my final year of residency in neurosurgery at the University of the West Indies. At this very moment, I am in Jamaica doing an elective towards the end because exams will be coming up in less than 2 months. So yeah, that's what's happening with that right now. And again, it's an honor being here with you guys today. Let's talk about more of the global neurosurgery aspect of it all.
Yes, we'll definitely get there. Dr. Rubio?
Yes, so I was born in Holland. Have Angolan parents. I grew up in Rotterdam, Dutch community, so mainly white neighborhoods, predominantly white schools, and eventually got into medical school after multiple educational figures tried to prevent me from going because they thought that I wasn't smart enough to become a doctor. But eventually got into medical school and then did my residency in neurosurgery. And why? Actually, during medical school, I really liked neurology. And I was actually thinking of becoming a neurologist. And during a research rotation, which was mainly looking at quality of life in after pediatric epilepsy surgery, that was the first time that I got into contact with neurosurgery. And I liked the aspect of the surgery part. So during my other rotations, I went to a neurosurgical department and asked if it was okay for me to look at what they do, join them, etc. So, and then I just rolled into that actually. So yeah, that's why a neurosurgeon. So it's the first doctor in my family. And I think with all the past, like growing up, people telling me that I couldn't achieve things made me want to achieve it. So I think that is why I eventually aimed for that. And how I came here, well, during my residency in Holland, a high income country where everything is available constantly, I wanted to see how things would be in a different setting. And I had the sense that I was missing out on a lot of basic educational things. I mean, during our residency, we operate very early on. So in the end, we have a lot of experience, hands-on. But I had the feeling that we were concentrated too much on all the tools we use. So I thought, I speak Portuguese, so why not go to Brazil, go to Professor Ivana de Oliveira and see how neurosurgery is done there. And that opened up the scope completely. And that actually prepared me for my position now, that is Curacao, which is in the Caribbean. Where when I came here, no neurosurgery department existed. There had been a neurosurgeon prior, but he already stopped around like 1.5 years and everything was old, the tools, everything. So that is how they lured me in, I guess, trying to, they told me, if you come and work here, you have a blank canvas, you can do whatever you want, you will be the only one, but you will have the chance to build the capacity here. And that is where I went, and currently have actually a very good setting.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing all of that. That's so interesting, and I really want to circle back to your experience in Curacao. But something you said, I think, really leads nicely into the next question. You were talking about how the number of people who were discouraging or tried to prevent you from entering medicine and neurosurgery. And so for all of our panelists, I mean, first of all, I'm really sorry that that happened. For all of our panelists, how have your identities, whether those are racial or ethnic or gender identities, shaped your experiences in your career thus far? Dr. Rubio already kind of touched on this. I don't know if you have more to share.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and that's just a fact. So I mean, there's no reason to apologize. Yes, it has been very tough, but it made me the person that I am today. And that means that you can tell me no, but I'm not going to go with that. I'm not going to stop. So I persevere, and in the situation that lots of us are in, you need that. So yes, even though the Netherlands is the country that I was born, I don't identify myself as Dutch. Just because, I was raised in a country where they didn't see me as such. But that opened other possibilities. So I think that is the reason why I, traveled as much as I did and decided to go into global neurosurgery.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Calderon, what about you?
It's definitely difficult. With yet neurosurgery, which is a male-dominated field. One of the things that I told myself is that let your work show it, let your CV say it, let your resume speak for it, for yourself. Because people are going to judge you based on what they see. Let it be down to objective, factual things. Let your CV speak for you. And I remind myself that there were women before me who got it done, and it was harder for them. So as much as it is still hard now, you could get it done, because a lot of people had to fight to get into this profession. So at the end of the day, you continue working, you know what your passion is, make sure you love it. Because if you don't love it, I don't think it's worth it. Make sure it's your passion, and make your CV, your resume, your publications speak for you. And that's all you need. It doesn't matter at the end of the day what anybody else is doing. Make sure you get into an environment that you could grow, that you could thrive, that you have the respect that you need, and let your work speak for you.
That's wonderful advice, Dr. Calderon. And it's so true that, we're all standing on the shoulders of so many people who worked even harder than we had to work to get to where they did. So that's a really important reminder. Thank you. Dr. Punchak?
Thank you. I feel like, I just wanted to call attention to this because it's so nice that this is a global neurosurgery panel, but actually all of us are women on the panel. And it's not advertised as a woman in neurosurgery panel, which it doesn't really trigger me, but I feel like it triggers some people to be okay, why do we have to think of gender or think of all this stuff when we're thinking about neurosurgical provider? That shouldn't really matter. So kudos to both of the other women on the panel today. You're both super inspirational. I think just building on what others have said already, for me, I've been sort of lucky. I think I haven't really felt singled out as a woman in neurosurgery, but that's because luckily I'm in a program that where my former chairman like really has supported and advocates for having like at least one female resident per admitting class, and there's only 3 residents per class. So I've been really lucky to be in that environment, and it definitely changes like the training environment too. So when I was interviewing for residency, that was one of the things I was looking for. So I remember interviewing at Penn, and I really liked it because I felt like there was a lot of representation, and I felt like very comfortable and at home here. And I've never really felt like I was singled out as a woman for being, I'm sure there are definitely things with patients that happens and things like that, but in terms of like the actual training environment, it's been like very welcoming. So I've really enjoyed that. And then in terms of, you know, my research and kind of how my identity has been formed by that, kind of going along with what Dr. Calderon mentioned before, I remember developing this like interest in surgery and then in neurosurgery, and talking to one of my sort of mentors at UCLA at the time. And no one at my institution was doing global neurosurgery. And even at that time, that was like a field very early in its stages of development. So he was kind of like, okay, I guess you can try to do some research projects, but I don't really know if anything that's going on. But you can also just stay on and like work in my lab. And again, like I knew that I wasn't really passionate about working in a lab, and I really wanted to like carve out a niche for myself and see if I could build upon like my passion for global health in general and find some opportunities within that, and that combined neurosurgery as well. And clearly it's worked out. So I think again, like do what you're passionate about and connect with the right people. And now it's like a much more growing and expanded field. So it's like really inspirational. Like sometimes I think I know like a lot of the stuff that's going on, and then I just meet like more people that are doing and expanding neurosurgery in other countries. So it's really exciting that it's exploded so much over the last 2 years.
Wow, thanks. Thank you so much. And it's wonderful to hear that you felt supported in your home residency program as well. Okay, so kind of switching gears a little bit, at least 2 of our panelists, Dr. Rubio and Dr. Calderon, have received formal training outside of the place they were born. And so what made you both choose to pursue that path? I think Dr. Rubio, you already talked about this a little bit. But Dr. Calderon, we know, had the observatorship recently at MGH. And did you guys feel that the flow of information and ideas during your time abroad was like mutual and bidirectional, or did it feel one-sided? And is that something that you valued, or would you have preferred a more kind of two-way communication if that didn't exist?
Krista, you're gonna.
Yeah, I'll start off. So I won the Harvard Massachusetts General International Observership. So I was in Boston from it was July last year to all the way to December. That observership, I did a period in the Harvard Medical School, the program of global surgery and social change, and I was under Dr. Keepak at that time. And I think just that opportunity, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm here today, because it altered a lot of things. It opened me to so much. That's how I ended up meeting Dr. Rubio. And then we ended up talking about global surgery and global neurosurgery, which was a term that we were not exposed to in Trinidad in med school. That was not a term that we were exposed to or had an idea of how to go about doing research in it. And being with Dr. Park at PGSSC, I got exposed to all the work that they were doing. I was in all the meetings and understanding the deficiencies in different countries and what they're doing to try to fix it. And you see how research is so important. And even what the work that I did with the paper that I did with Dr. Rubio and Dr. Park, I'm looking at the deficiencies and highlighting the things that you didn't know was a problem. And the reason that we didn't know it was a problem because it hasn't been published. It is not known. So doing that observership, it's the reason why I'm here today, because it opened me up to a whole new world of research and thinking about neurosurgery in a different facet. So it was an exceptional period of time.
Wow, that sounds like very special. And we're so glad that you know, I mean, I'm so glad that that was such a meaningful experience for you because, yeah, lovely. Dr. Rubio?
Well, I think if I look back at every single time I went abroad during my medical school and fellowship, I think all of them had a different impact. Going to the States where I did research for like during my medical school, that showed me that I'm not necessarily interested in going to the States and work, because that's a whole different type of environment that I don't, well, for me, that I don't think that was would have been the best choice, because back then I was thinking about doing USMLEs and all that stuff. But after that, even though it was very valuable experience, I decided not to go in that direction. I also did a observership in Malawi, but that was more of a general observership, and that was partially trying to find my roots, even though Malawi is not the country of my parents, but it is the continent. It's part of the continent. But also the first time going to LMIC and seeing how different cultures and you know, lack of resources, how that influences the healthcare. And then the same for Brazil. And I think that impacted me the most because it was more into my you know, career. I was already a neurosurgeon, so I already had a specific path. But that's because I stayed there a year in Sao Paulo. And that actually showed me that working in a country that does not always has access to all the resources, does not make the people who work there perform less or, you know, have less ability. It actually showed me that they are very much more resourceful in what they can achieve. And they taught me so much. I think that countries that have every single tool to their for them to use, you just stop thinking. You rely too much on all the equipment. So that was something that actually prepared, yeah, like I said, it prepared me to this for my position currently.
Wow, thank you very much. I think that's actually a really great point to transition into a more kind of systems level discussion. And so I think kind of in a similar vein to what we've been discussing, a pretty oft-cited reason for human capital shortage in low and middle income countries is this idea of like brain drain, that all of the, you know, most accomplished people are actually going to want to leave a particular country for a different work environment where they can be paid more. And so I'm wondering how much of an impact, first of all, brain drain has played in everyone's home healthcare system here. And are there ways that you guys think we should be incentivizing trainees to, if they leave, at least return to their home countries as they begin to practice more independently? We can start maybe with Dr. Calderon.
Okay, so I'm from St. Lucia, and when I graduated from medical school, I had the option of going back home. But one of the things I wanted to do, I wanted to pursue my career in neurosurgery. So the idea of brain drain actually has this, there's this, so somebody could look at me and say, I'm part of the brain drain. because I could have gone home immediately after medical school and be a general physician. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to become a neurosurgeon because I feel that that's an important role to have in your country. So one of my aims is to go back home eventually and work there and help and do better for my country. But I still have to train and become as good as I can be. And the problem with that is that I cannot necessarily fulfill that back in St. Lucia, at least not right now. So brain drain has this, I don't want to be part of the problem, but if somebody looks at my story, they could be like, yeah, you part of the problem, you part of the brain drain. But I know in the long term, there would be a beneficial effect of me actually finishing or completing my training. Ways that the brain drain could be deterred, I think if the healthcare systems in countries start backing, the government starts backing the healthcare systems more and just putting greater focus on it, putting the necessary expenditure into it, just to make things better in the hospital systems, that will do so much. Because no one wants to work in an environment where you can't get simple equipment done or to do surgery safely. So I think that's one of the biggest things that could be done. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for pointing out that this group that we sort of label as being complicit in brain drain actually probably has very nuanced reasons for wanting to pursue higher training outside of their home country. That's a really great point. Dr. Punchak, do you have thoughts about this?
Yeah, I had some thoughts. It's interesting, like building again on some of the comments of Dr. Calderon. You know, in places where I've worked, for instance, in Uganda, up until like a couple of years ago, for instance, there was no neurosurgery residency program. So most of the like interns and medical officers that I would work with that were interested in neurosurgery, they had to go to either like Egypt, Morocco, or South Africa, and get like funding. So that was very challenging. Now, you know, that some of them have trained and come back. They're working with some of the other partnerships, such as Duke University has a partnership there, and they're building a residency program there and training residents locally within the country. So I think it's just all part of a continuum. So you have to start somewhere. So you have to get your training in the best places. And then as long as there's an incentive, and I think a lot of people do want to, like, they're not just motivated, especially neurosurgeons. I mean, like most neurosurgeons, especially ones working in global neurosurgery, are not motivated by like making the most money or like having the most prominent position. A lot of people within the field like want to use our skills and get like all the best skills to give back to our countries. And I mean, it's interesting because like I was born in Russia, and for a long time I was like, that would be really interesting actually to go back to Russia or Ukraine or any of those other countries. Obviously, currently the situation is like very difficult over there, but it is also like one of my goals down the line. But in the meantime, I'm getting my global health experience in other places.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Rubio?
Yeah, what can I say? Well, I think brain drain is something that I think we all have experienced, especially after COVID. I think a lot of people, you know, left healthcare, tried to find a different place to work. So not only neurosurgeons, not only, you know, the residents, but nurses also. But, you know, the whole reason I'm in Curacao is because there was no other neurosurgeon there. So I got convinced to go to Curacao. There was no residency in Curacao. So if you want, so if like how they call their inhabitants Yuri Corsao, so son of Curacao. if one of the students want to go to medical school, they either go to the Netherlands or they go to Costa Rica or other countries in the neighborhood. Most of them go to the Netherlands, and then they need to go into the residency. And what I did when I started working there was try to figure out if there is a medical student that wants to do neurosurgery, and if they would be, have the ability to eventually become a neurosurgeon. So currently there's one in residency and has 1 year to go with a promise to come back. There is a discussion going on in the islands of the Dutch Caribbean, or that belong to the Dutch Kingdom. How do you get people to go to the Netherlands, do their training, their residency, and then have them come back? In a couple of years ago, no one wanted to come back because they were not interested in working in crisis mode every single time. Because let's face it, it's not always very well organized, especially if you compare it to the Dutch system. So it was very difficult to get people back. They were going to train and then made promises to come back, and then life happened and they never came back. So now they are trying to have a program that is actually kind of similar to New Zealand and Australia, where they give places to specific residency places to people that want to relocate afterwards, because otherwise you don't enter into the residency program. And that is a discussion that's happening now to try and get the people back to their country.
Wow, that sounds like a promising initiative. I hope that works out. And I'm hoping actually, Dr. Rubio, that you can tell us a little more about what your day-to-day is like as the only neurosurgeon right now on the island of Curacao. Like, what kind of caseload are you handling? What providers are you collaborating with, if not other neurosurgeons?
Mm-hmm. So I've been working on Curacao for a little over 6 years. When I decided to leap, I said, okay, it's fine, but I cannot be on call 365 days a year. That's just impossible. I need to go. I need my additional training, because if you stop doing certain surgeries, you will lose, the feeling of this surgery. You need to, keep training. So I contacted several of the people that trained me, but also talked with other people from different university hospitals, so academic hospitals, to see if they were interested in helping me out. And then I had to ask permission to the insurance company and the government for them to come, the hospital also. So we made this program for them to assist me try to build the capacity that way. So yes, I am the only person that is there constantly, but for me to be here now in Norway, there's someone there. And they mainly do whatever comes their way, but also do outpatient clinic, etc. So my week is basically, well, I would say pretty regular. So outpatient clinic twice a week, then twice a week surgeries, Well, actually, 3 times a week surgery planned. Most of it is spine, but I do whatever comes my way. And then the trauma that goes in between. So I have a catchment area of about 220,000 inhabitants, and try to have one neurosurgeon every day on the island. And sometimes we are 2. And if we are with 2, then I try to plan more complex surgeries. And if there's no time, I do them myself. I mean, you grow up really quickly if you're alone. So that is, that's kind of the surgery part. And then all of a sudden I became manager and educator and leader and everything at once. So I needed to, and still do, educate nurses, different departments that, because no one knew what to do with neurosurgery, not in trauma setting, not in the pediatrics. I mean, we don't have a pediatric intensive care unit. We have a NICU, but not a pediatric intensive care unit. But what do you do with a, 4-year-old kid who has a trauma and needs attention? So it's a whole complex thing. And then the coding of the surgeries. Also, I do things that were never done before. How do we code this? What are the finances? It's a whole issue. And I'm always the centerpiece. So
It sounds
it
very
revolves
complicated.
around me.
Yeah.
Just kind of, that's it.
Wow.
Can I actually ask Dr. Rubio a
Yeah,
question?
please go ahead.
I'm curious, so like when you have planned cases, but then for emergencies, do you have someone that you've trained to help you? Like, or no, you just do all because I
No, the
imagine
thing is-
there's some,
sorry.
like, I don't know if you have a general surgeon or something that, what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a good question. So we don't have, we are not a training hospital in that sense. So we don't have a tie to a university on the island. There are residents, like junior doctors, that come for a year, but it's their first job, and it's not, and most of the time it's not attached to an actual residency program. They just go there to have experience in Curacao. So I have thought about, having, for example, the intensivist put in ICP meters, or the general surgeon doing, I don't know, a ventricular shunt or something.
yeah.
But partially it's I am responsible for if things go wrong, and
Right.
if I can handle the workload, then I don't see a reason for that. If we are talking about other islands that send to me, then I am full on wanting to collaborate with people there, because it is that would be better for patient outcome, because it takes too long for them to come to me in an emergency setting. But it is a good question. Yes, I've thought about it. But the residents, they come and go. So yes, I teach them simple, like putting in an external lumbar shunt, for example, or putting an ICP meter in. And if they are handy, they can.
Yeah.
But I did not teach other specialties to do it.
Okay, got it.
Thanks for your insightful question, Dr. Punchak. This one is for the whole group. I think everyone here is involved in a variety of different research projects. And of course, that research might be like traditional scientific or clinical research, in which you're describing disease processes, you're writing case reports, thinking about new surgical techniques, all of that. And then, you might also be doing more equity-oriented research about disparities that exist, as Dr. Calderon was mentioning earlier, thinking about workforce strengthening. And so I'm wondering, how do you choose to balance those two kinds of research in your career? How do you choose to prioritize? And do you find that one type of research work has maybe been more typically rewarded in your career by funding agencies, et cetera? Who wants to go first? Maybe Dr. Punchak can start.
Sure. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, I've always tried to, before I started residency, during my research year, I really just prioritized like global neurosurgery research, because I actually did the medical school version of the Harvard program in global surgery and social change partnership. So that was the focus of that opportunity. But it's interesting though, because like when I was applying for residency, and still I think this is true today, there isn't as many like known neurosurgery names within that field yet. So, which is something that's like really important for the residency application process for those who will choose to be applying for residency in the US. So I also tried to balance that out, and maybe like 30% of the time do some research with the mentors I had at UCLA, so that those mentors could like speak well on my behalf, and also like promote me and help me get into residency. Now that I'm in residency, I would say my department has been like pretty supportive in terms of me choosing to pursue global neurosurgery research, but I also have an interest in pediatrics. And it's just, by the end of residency, when I'm applying for my pediatric neurosurgery fellowship, I want to keep in mind, that I want to be academically productive. So I try to split things maybe 50-50 and do half of my clinical research through projects that are already established at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and the other half like develop new ideas and to continue to work on building capacity and research capacity in Uganda and in Mexico now this year, something that I've started. But I think part of that for me has been because it is tougher to get research off the ground in a low and middle income setting. I've been lucky. I've met like really good mentors through Mission Brain to do some of my work in Mexico. And I have like really great medical students that do data collection there. So that's been very smooth, but still I know by the end of this year, which is my research year, I'll just have the data and I'll still need to spend a lot of time analyzing it. So there's going to be a lag time on that. Whereas the researcher's shop, I have a lot of the data already. So it's something that I can devote time to and know that I'm going to have at least like a couple papers out by the time that I'm applying for research fellowship in a year. So it's kind of a balance. Like I'm passionate about both. So I try to split up my time like 50-50 and also like keep in the back of my mind the fact that like I'm still a trainee. So I do say yes to like a lot of things. And sometimes it's almost a balance of having to be like, okay, let me focus on like getting this project across the finish line, and maybe I can like help with this project in a couple of months.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Dr. Calderon, you seemed to maybe resonate with a little bit of what Dr. Punchak was saying. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, rightly said. Being a resident and taking on the research aspect, it is a lot because you've almost taken on another weight, adding on another something to your plate, which is already full. And sometimes you want to say yes to everything. And then being sort of a type A personality, you don't want to have many things on your to-do list and you're getting 4 out of 10 done. So it's very mindful to understand your capacity as a human with an outside life and as a resident. In terms of global neurosurgery, as I said, it wasn't really something I was introduced to while I was in medical school back in Trinidad. So now going back there, I have this new knowledge of, yeah, there's this whole new world of global neurosurgery research. Guys, are you interested? Can we tap into this? What can we do? Because I'm approaching exams, I know I do have the drive right now to push the other trainees into saying, okay, let's get something done, let's do this, because they're not interested in it as I am right now. So it will almost be, I have to push or motivate them. So you always have to be mindful of what you have going on and sort of prioritize. But it is something that I want to introduce to them and let them see that this is a whole new world of research, and there's so much you could do with it, especially in the untapped resources. For example, Trinidad, there's so much you could talk about. There's so many things you could highlight or bring to the forefront, so much change that could be applied. Yeah, but the residency research balance is truly something that needs to be mastered.
Definitely. I'll punt the question to our non-resident, Dr. Rubio.
The balance got even worse. Yeah. I think my position is a bit different because the hospital is not academic, but we see a lot of academic stuff because it's the only hospital, and we are, especially for neurosurgery, the one that receives the patients from other nearby islands. So the cases that we see are complex, like you already said, introducing me. We see a lot of complex things, and I really want to do basic research in that. But I cannot do everything at once. So I focused my time on the capacity building, on that stuff, and now I'm getting into the more of the research part of it, and trying to find medical students to come to the island and do more research for me. The thing is, the country and the hospital doesn't have all the research laws in place, so it's constantly talking with the lawyer. Okay, what can we do? Is this something I can start? Is it something I cannot start? What do we wait? Do we need to wait on, I don't know, hospital insurance to to cover some of these things? Med students, for some reason, when they come to Curacao, research is not really the one thing on their mind. They would like to enjoy the Caribbean sun. So it's very difficult to find someone that is completely focused on that. Recently, I did find a medical student that now is a doctor, and hopefully will be the third neurosurgeon in line to come work on Curacao. Mira Limon, very talented young lady, and she helped me collect the data for all our cervical cervical stenosis patients, where we have seen very interesting, very high results of percentage of OPLO. And we did write a manuscript, and then we are trying to publish it now. And then, there was one paper that we published it in, or tried to get it published, and they rejected it purely on the basis of, I don't think Curacao is the population that the general public is interested in. So that is something that we also need to deal with if we want to get our research published. Then we also need to have editors that understand that some things, need to change. I completely understand that, doing a simple descriptive study is not the world most, best research, but I need to start somewhere. I would, rather genome the whole island and figure out why this weird thing is happening, because it's not known in research. So I don't know, struggles. But if there's a medical resident or medical student that wants to collect some data, you can contact me.
Okay, audience members, did you hear that? You can contact Dr. Rubio.
Please, you're welcome.
But I think that's a really important point. It seems like the theme here has been that it's difficult to balance like sort of more basic research and equity focused research, no matter where you are. But in particular, if you're based in a low resource setting, it sounds like so much of your day-to-day is just capacity building and thinking about this, that there's no time for this other, more intellectual piece of like, why is this particular disease process even occurring? And even if there is time, people might not want to listen to you because they expect a certain type of research that you're not able to produce with the resources that you have available.
Exactly.
So I think that's a really important point that I want everyone in the audience to walk away with.
Yeah,
Thank you.
there are no finances, I don't have funding. No one here is going to fund anything. So I
Yeah.
need other resources, but I need proof to
Yeah,
get the resources. So yeah.
exactly.
mean,
And it looks like we
vicious
have
circle.
at least one audience member who is actually interested in contacting you, Dr. Rubio. So
Please,
you should
yes,
email in the
yes.
chat.
I mean,
That's
we can do, yeah, sure.
excellent.
I'm
Wow.
open. Yeah,
Send them your
Wonderful.
email address, Dr. Rubio.
sorry?
You should put your email address in the
Yeah.
group.
I will.
Excellent. So now I want to zoom out even more. I'm going to ask a kind of daunting question. But what do you all think are the main challenges that need to be solved if we're going to someday ensure that everyone in the world has access to neurosurgical care? Like the one thing, for example, that you think is standing in our way right now?
That's a very big question.
I know, it's like the
That's a
biggest
difficult
question.
to answer. Yeah.
Dr. Punchak, do you want to take a stab at it?
No. Let's answer. I feel like there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of interest in like the newer generation of medical students and younger doctors. So that's really exciting because I feel like the solutions that we need to find should be coming from people that are like actually within the country and not from somewhere else. Where, like in the US, where we think maybe some people think that everything is done correctly, and then we just instill our agenda on other places. So I feel like it's very positive that we have a lot of interest and a lot of motivation to get things done. I kind of, I guess just because Dr. Rubio mentioned this, I do definitely agree. Like it's harder to get things published from a lower middle income setting. I'm even thinking to like a paper that I'm working on the edits for right now. And there's like there is a lot of interest, but there's so much question about like follow-up and like things that are just like were not well captured in our retrospective data collection. And it's hard to explain that, but I feel like there should be more of an effort on like making sure that things from lower middle income settings are getting published, especially with authors from lower middle income settings. And a lot of it also has to do with like making sure that people in those settings have some research training. And that's like a big interest area of mine whenever I've like traveled to Uganda and to Mexico as well. I've had this idea that we should like have maybe establish like a monthly or bi-weekly like research meeting for people who are interested, and then work on developing skills for those individuals from those areas so that they can have like more tools to publish things, because you need to publish to get funding, and it's just this whole cycle,
Yeah.
Right. Dr. Calderon, do you have thoughts? We've heard now about a little bit about the research piece. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, that question you asked is really $1 million question right there, and maybe more. Even when I started at PGSSC back in Boston and started reading all that was done already, and I'm like, this seems unsurmountable, but really it isn't. And I think right now, this is the path, this is the conversations that need to be already being had, and you have a lot of players in the game right now trying to instill change and make things better, and that's where the work begins. We won't see the change right now, but it's already in play. It will just take time and a lot of understanding from the community and the governments and making all these policy changes. but the work is already being done, and all of this is part of it. Just speaking about it is part of it.
Yeah, and kind of on that note, we have a question from the chat from April over at Mission Brain, who wanted to take the opportunity to ask how nonprofit organizations and also kind of more global events like this hackathon can address some of the challenges you all have encountered in global neurosurgery. In what direction do you think people should be focusing their efforts? If anyone has thoughts about that.
Well, it was my time to speak anyway.
Yeah,
You know, I think just having this is already huge. I mean, because I didn't know this actually existed. I'm very sorry, but this, so when I was invited for this, I'm like, oh, okay, this is new to me. And I wish I had thought about it, but no, not my idea. You know, I think in combining the two, the thing that I've encountered trying to get more information from the region, the Caribbean or Africa, because I'm also trying to get the Portuguese-speaking African countries a bit more together, and helping how I can, to try and get some research done. One of the things that keeps coming back is the mistrust. I call someone and the first thing that happens is, I don't want to talk to you. Who are you? Why are you contacting me? What is your agenda? You probably have a secret agenda. So now I'm just going to give you a story. And then the moment I try to connect authentically, then all of a sudden the story changes. Neurosurgery isn't always a nice specialty. Crystal said it, we face a lot of issues, not only in complications, mortality, morbidity, but also we need to talk open and honest about what's going on, because otherwise nothing is going to change. And also editors of journals need to understand that too. I mean, this whole game, sometimes I see it as a game. You get this published because that person. You get that published because, that's ridiculous. We all need to be, maybe that's naive for my part, could be, but I think we need to be honest with each other. Everyone has felt like an imposter.
Mm.
Everyone has felt that it was, they wanted to quit. Everyone has had sleepless nights over a specific case, didn't want to confront family members, didn't want, everyone has had that. Stop telling me that you don't have complications or that, it's all amazing. That's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has issues, so let's just talk openly about it, because if we don't do that, the first step is not even gonna start.
Yeah, I think the importance of honesty and open communication has definitely been underscored in this panel already, and I hope that our teams will be able to be honest and communicate openly with each other as they go on to compete during the hackathon as well.
But also learn from each other. Don't always look, at the high income countries.
Yeah, definitely.
It's the other people that, are very inventive and thinking, oh, how can I fix this because I don't have that,
Exactly. And that's definitely something that we hope all of our audience here who are on your hackathon teams internalizes moving forward. I think we're a little over time already, but we had 2 more wonderful questions in the chat that I just want to make sure we can get to if the panelists are okay with staying an extra 5 minutes. Would that be okay? Okay, thank you so much. So we have one question that actually I think flows really nicely from what we've already been talking about. Earlier, Dr. Calderon mentioned, your CV really speaking for itself. And so our participant asks, how would any of you recommend women who are coming from developing countries and who might not be studying at renowned universities to analyze and use our own limitations to make innovations? Essentially, she's asking, how can she sell her image to demonstrate that she can essentially beat her own limitations?
I could start off. It's so important to realize what tools, although you might not have all of it, if you just realize what tools and what resources that you have in your own home base. And sometimes your resources might come in the form of the patients, could come in form of the consultants that you have around you. And these are your resources, and you could build on that. Because although you're not in one of the developed nations, you're not in the US or Canada or Europe, you have another point to show, a different facet. And that is also important. And that's what you need to understand, that that facet of medicine or surgery is also important. So you also have resources. You may not have the biggest and most expensive resources, but you have resources available to you. And it's taking that and trying to build on it. And you could start as small as just simple case reports, and then you start growing with your case series, and you build, and you just start collecting. You could start collecting data prospectively. If there's a specific case that you guys do a lot of, start collecting data prospectively, looking at what the outcomes look like, because we have to use what we have available, whatever that may be.
Thank you. That was very wise, and I hope that answered your question, Nageli. And we have one more from the chat from actually a few minutes ago. Back when we were talking about brain drain and how problematic the term can be, but also how real it sometimes the effects can be. This participant wanted to know, does training outside of your home country in the best places translate to the needs in their own country? For example, getting a subspecialty in functional neurosurgery might not be very useful if you're going back to a place that doesn't even have a drill or a microscope.
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. Recently I read a paper that the person that's asking this question also read. And it was a response, a letter to the editor saying, residency needs to be unanimously the same. I have to have, either 5 years or 6 years, and it all has to be the same. I agree that we have to have more of the same type of residency, but the same, I'm not so sure, because whatever I learned during my residency, I relearned while I'm in Curacao. I was not able to do things then that I know how to do now, because it's tailored to what I see. So that's a very good question. Yes, it is good to look at what your country needs. And then try, if your country needs functional neurosurgery, then make a plan before and go talk to governments and go talk to insurance and go, make a business case to try and figure out if it is actually worth going into that specialty. Because otherwise, it's going to be lost time and money. But that's
Yeah, that's really fair. And I think our hackathon participants are going to be practicing sort of this skill of trying to figure out what is actually needed in the context, in the local context, even at the hackathon. But thank you all participants for your attention. And thank you so much to our panelists for what I think was a really frank and refreshing discussion on the state of global neurosurgery and also on personal experiences. I think we've talked about so much, and you've definitely given me food for thought. I'm sure many of our participants as well. Yes, so the last thing, do you have any closing advice for our participants who are in the middle of kind of this weekend-long journey where they're trying to innovate new solutions for like problems or failure points in neurosurgical access in low and middle income countries?
I can start because I've had my office hours actually a little bit before this. And I feel like one thing is like have confidence in your idea and don't doubt yourself. And I would say make sure that you don't try to address too much. So I feel like we're all, everyone is excited and you want to address like all the issues and like all of the steps to, treatment of a brain tumor, but the best ideas are the ones that are really well thought out, but address just like one point in the whole treatment continuum. So I would just make sure that you're very detailed in whatever solution that you choose.
Absolutely. Dr. Calderon or Dr. Rubio?
No, I agree. I
Go
agree.
ahead.
No, that's the only thing I wanted to say. No, I agree. Yeah. Less is more.
Dr. Calderon?
I also agree, and just keep on persevering. I know research could be very long, and sometimes you could almost like it's going nowhere, but just keep on persevering and find other like-minded persons like yourself to have a good support system, and yeah, just keep it going.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Thank you all so much for joining us. We really, really appreciated your time, panelists. Participants, we appreciated your insightful questions. We're going to close out this session so the participants can get back to work and the panelists can get back to their busy, busy days. Or in Dr. Rubio's case, her wonderful vacation. But thank you all very much and have a wonderful weekend all.